With this assignment, we're going to be looking at the visual aspects, sort of the visual storytelling aspects. Now, don't get confused here. When people sometimes say visual storytelling, they think of a sequence of images with actions that clearly spell out a kind of linear progression. First this happened, then that happened, and then the other thing happened. And that is not what I am going to be focusing on here. And for a very good reason here. So let me go a little bit more into this discrepancy, right? People who are not digital storytellers, visual storytellers, media storytellers, think logically that a story is a sequence of events, first this, then that, then the other, and that they're logically connected or connected through cause and effect. And that's what a story is. And if there's anything that I want you to get from this course, is that there is so much more outside of that. And in fact, most storytelling, quote unquote, big air quotes, is outside of that. And that's primarily where I focus on this course, is outside of that, outside of the logical sequence of causes and effects, to recount a linear sequence, so to speak, a story. And the reasons are not only that most stories are not logical sequences of events, but also that even those stories that are pretty linear plot-wise, the best ones, and even the good ones, the capable ones, don't simply rely on the logical connections between causes and effects to tell their stories. Not those stories that are in any way full of impact and art and persuasion. And that's really, what we're focusing on here: impact, art, persuasion. Probably think of a bunch more words than that. So the core of this, to get at the kind of the most simple basic building block, is the sequence. We'll call it the sequence. And this is something that all media people, digital media people, have to sort of master in the beginning, because everything comes down to the sequence. The sequence, as the word suggests, is a bit by bit, a linear sequence. And in this case, it's a linear sequence of images. And so that's what I want to focus on here, is for you to create a linear sequence of images. And I want to focus on what, how to do that, and what you're aiming for, and what you're not necessarily aiming for, and some of the things that might be helpful to inspire you in doing this. Carrying out this assignment is a creative process. It's a creative act. It is not necessarily something that you sort of creatively come up with in your head and then merely execute by shooting. Instead, it is truly a process of exploration. And so what I want to do is give you an example of something that I did this morning, so that I can freshly relate the same experience that you could have, which is a creative process. In the slide following this one, you're going to view a sequence of 11 images. they are going to run automatically like a video. And then you can proceed past that to the rest of the instructional and lesson. So, but before you click on the next slide to view this, let me say a little bit. The title of it is Birthday. Um, it is all of these shots I shot this morning, and I shot a whole bunch of shots, but I selected those. I didn't know what I was going to shoot before I shot it. I've never shot these shots before. So I truly did make this up on my own in the moment. And I'm going to, that's important because I want to let you in on the sort of thinking process of doing this. Um, the slides are playing back from I put all these slides into uh, a Macintosh program because I have an Apple Macintosh laptop, and just photos. And then I created a little album, and then I exported as a video, as a slideshow. I'm not suggesting that you have to do that. We'll talk a little bit more about what your assignment will entail. But that's what I did here, just so it would make it very simple for you. You wouldn't have to page through each individual slide. Instead, you get a little bit of a slideshow. Um, the slides are timed at something like 5 seconds each, or something. It's slow. I think conventionally, the slideshow application runs faster than that, almost 3 seconds a slide. I really wanted it slower, and I would want that from you as well, is to give us time to linger on each photo. Not too much time, but I think 5 seconds, 6 seconds is good enough. The other thing is I did not include the kind of stock music or any kind of music that comes with it. That's really important. You should not as well. I know that the music is more entertaining and it will make things smoother and it'll feel more like an art project. And there is a place for music at a certain point, but not in this assignment. Instead, we're looking simply at these images and we're feeling how they work on us just on their own without the modification of the music underneath it. Um, so, if you would, you can go to the next slide, view the little slideshow. It takes about a minute. You can view it a number of times if you want, and then proceed on to the next slide after that when I am going to continue the lesson around the creation of this little sequence of images. To start this breakdown of that 11 image sequence, first I want you to look at this. This is the uh, folder that contains all the shots that I took, and they're actually organized in the order in which I took them. So from upper left down to the bottom right. Um, and there's an interesting first lesson here. The first three images, which I'll focus in on the next slide, but I just want to say something. The very first thing I did was, I'd gotten up in the morning. I'd already had my tea and was had done a bunch of other things already. Um, so when it came time for me to come up with this assignment, I thought, okay, let me do what I'm going to ask you to do, which is to shoot a sequence. Um, and there are many ways and many kinds of sequences to shoot. In this case, I tried to do what I am assigning you is to shoot a sequence that is perhaps seemingly to you to be um, not extraordinary. So, uh, you might have some really interesting, cool ideas of this happening and then that happening and then shooting this and then shooting that. Um, my recommendation, if you want, is to focus on this creative process of trying to mine the ordinary, trying to extract out of the ordinary something that might be a little bit more than ordinary. So, true to that assignment, I looked around me in the kitchen, and for whatever reason, I happened to notice this electric teapot of mine. And I thought, okay, that's where I'm going to start. And so I took out my phone, which is what I shot all this on, and you know, looked at the tea kettle and saw it in the morning light coming through the window over the kitchen, and I took a picture. And this is a really good example where it's not a wonderful picture, and the picture actually doesn't show up in the final sequence. I don't deem it to be worthy of the final sequence. I mean, it's an okay-ish picture. It's a little out of focus. Um, it has some what some people might consider problems, but actually the problem turned out to be the inspiration for me. So I think maybe that's the first lesson. If you have a problem with an image that you've shot or you're having a problem shooting something, give a passing thought that the problem might be the way, it might be the solution, it might be the very thing that is worth pursuing. You can really take this idea far, very, very far. You can build an entire art career out of this. I will argue that many, if not most artists, their careers, in fact, are made from this basic premise of maybe intending to do something standard and normal. Like, let's just take a normal, quote unquote, semi professional, semi clear picture. And then all of a sudden coming upon, like, oh, there's lens flare, there's light coming in. Um, and that's kind of a problem. Um, and instead, kind of using that to inspire. Now, the inspiration here is not necessarily terribly logical or anything, but it's inspiration nonetheless. Once I took the picture and I saw what I'd shot. Now, remember, I did not pre visualize the entire sequence in my mind. I sort of knew I could do a sequence about anything. So I took I looked at the picture. I saw the quote unquote problem, which was the lens flare light, and I was inspired at that moment to think, "Oh, this is about morning. This is about the sun and maybe that's where I'm going to start anyways is is all these accidental things that happen with light maybe I don't know um, but it really said to me this light is flaring my lens because it's the morning time and it's coming in at an angle and so I guess I felt like this was morning. Well, I mean, you can look back on it now and say, duh, yes, it was morning. But I'm telling you, I wasn't, the thought that I would be doing a sequence about morning didn't didn't cross my mind until after I had shot this. And so the second shot, which is what I'll talk about in the next slide in a moment, is so I shot the tea kettle from sort of a middle distance, sort of, not an interesting shot. And then once I got sort of a little bit of inspiration, then I realized, okay, well, at least I know where I can start. And I needed to start with the next image. So I actually went backwards, sort of, in my mind and said, wait, let's first do this. So in the next slide, I'll show you what I did and explain why I did it that way. So I backed away from the electric tea kettle, and I actually had to move outside of the kitchen into the dining room and shoot through the on the other side of the counter. You can't see it, but there's a counter in front of me to get this shot. But this shot didn't automatically come out of my phone. I actually had to mess with it because, of course, the phone and most automated cameras um, don't want you to make a shot like this. The phone would see this and say, "Oh, that's too dark, and there's too many shadows, and there's no detail. You can hardly make out the faces of those cabinets. Really, the only things you can see reasonable are the sky and the trees in the background outside the window. But the electric tea kettle, the stuff, and you can't even see what's on the countertop. You can just barely make out dishes. So that's a good important lesson to note here. And that is um, you have to exert control over what you're going to show and more importantly what you are not going to show. And you have to understand that the way our consumer devices like our phones and so on are set up, it doesn't have that idea, that agenda, for example. You can do that, just as I did here, but you have to take an extra step. And of course, if you're not familiar, the extra step on the iPhone, for example, for me is to uh, tap on the image right where the window is, right? And so that tells the iPhone to override the general exposure so that it prioritizes exposure for this part of the picture. This is before you take the picture, right? And and so it allows you that kind of crude manual control. So once I click on my finger right where the sky and the window is, of course the whole rest of the image gets dimmer. The view through the iPhone gets dimmer, and then for a little while there's also a little slider on the right with a little, looks like a little sun. And I knew myself that I even wanted it to be darker. So I dragged the slider down with my finger. It's half the time, three-quarters of the time, I lose the slider and I have to re-tap and so on. But anyways, being persistent, I reduced the amount of light until the light coming through the window, the sky and the trees, wasn't too bright, wasn't blown out. It's bright, but more importantly, all those cabinets begin to disappear into some shadow. And I'm pretty uh, daring in the amount of shadow. But actually, when you saw this photo, I don't know, you probably didn't think, "Oh my God, I can't see anything. This is such a bad photo." You might have felt like, "Oh, this is a photo with a lot of mood to it," which is exactly what I was going for, right? You might say, "Oh, this photo seems naturalistic. This photo feels like morning." But you don't ordinarily get that automatically with the auto exposure. So that's one of the first things I'm going to ask of you is override the auto exposure so that you can control what's in what's exposed. Now, if I had shot this and it didn't involve a bright window, well, then I wouldn't even have had the possibility to push things into shadow because everything would have been like in middle tones. So that's a really important lesson too, which is those very shots that are so problematical, like you've got an open, bright window outside and darkness inside. Actually, like I said in the beginning, that obstacle can be the inspiration. So in my case, it was the inspiration to say, "Hey, I want to plunge the rest of the kitchen into darkness. And I know how to do that. I do that by making sure that there's a bright area that I can adjust the exposure to." So so I use that obstacle as inspiration, just as I said, that flare. By the way, if I let the camera just auto expose this, you actually would have seen that flare again. So, okay. The other thing is that you might notice is the window's a little off center. So I don't have the window in the center. And the electric tea kettle is not in the center of the image. It is centered left to right, but up to down it's not. So there's nothing of subs of importance in the center. A little sliver on the edge of light on the edge of the cabinet, and that's okay. Now, excuse me. Let me back up and say the next thing. The next thing is in some ways this is a really conventional photo to start a sequence with. In fact, it might even be too conventional. So I want you to watch out for this. In classic sort of filmmaking techniques, if this were like a film, and by the way, these image sequences are just films, and they're the same way that you would shoot perhaps if you were actually shooting motion picture images, if you were shooting video, shooting film. These don't move, but the other shots would be with motion video. So a classic, almost textbook way to open a sequence or a scene, you go, scene, sequence, same thing, is with what's called an establishing shot. And an establishing shot, um, it has a lot of particular meanings. What it first of all, it's established because it's the first shot. It's the first shot the viewer sees. So it establishes mood, it establishes time of day, it establishes um, location, point of view, um, psychological space, all of that kind of stuff. Um, in the old days, in the beginning of filmmaking, the establishing shot was a little more prosaic. It was letting the viewer know, sort of set the scene, and literally they took the meaning back from the stage era in which you had scenery and in a staged play before movies, the curtain would arise and the first thing the audience would see is the setting, the scenery. Oh, this scene's in a bedroom. Oh, this scene is on a busy street in New York City, whatever. And early filmmaking did the same thing is it felt compelled to carefully, not to disorient the viewer, establish location setting. Now, we know, you should know, that is not where we are today. It seems like even little kids who haven't seen many movies don't need that kind of babying when it comes to setting scenes. Lots and lots of sequences start with extreme close-ups, with cutaways, with swoosh pans, with you name it. And we may never in a whole sequence or a scene get one of these, a classic establishing shot. I put this in here, but you know, it's a dangerous thing, dangerous in the sense that it's very conventional. It could be boring. The only reason why this works, I think, is all of that darkness and shadow and the extreme contrast and the sliver of light sort of quality to it. It makes the viewer look. You have to do a little quick scanning to deduce, oh, it's a kitchen and it's morning and stuff. And that's the only saving grace for this because otherwise there's nothing spectacular about this shot. Now I've just hinted at something that I'm going to amplify a little bit later on. But so there is my first shot. Once I had shot that wide shot, then from outside the kitchen looking at the big window, I kind of had a better sense and feeling. And I actually went back to do the shot that I originally shot, which is of the tea kettle. But this time, uh, I kind of had more inspiration. And of course, I also have a really important guiding principle, and I think this is something that you could take to the bank. This is a really important lesson, and that is that um, human beings are close-up animals. I haven't heard anyone say it exactly that way. That's my own way of saying it. But the close-up, the extreme close-up, reigns supreme uh, in terms of um, uh, how it affects human beings, and that means viewers and so on. And it also works to stimulate your own creativity. Um, this is something I believe very deeply, and I want to make sure all of you get this principle and use it. Um, uh, it is probably the reason why most people don't get this maybe intuitively, is because it is not logical. Our logical brains think, hey, if you're going to do a picture of an electric tea kettle, get the whole tea kettle in there. You know the drill is if your mom or dad is taking a picture of you. And you're standing outside and you're graduating from high school or something, they feel like they got to back up so that they get you from your head to your toe kind of thing. Not every parent is like that, but that and maybe that generation is dying out because they're just visually not I don't think as sophisticated. What we now know, especially media makers know, is that human beings two things. One, human beings can fill in the missing parts. In fact, they want to fill in the missing parts. I can't tell you how important that principle is it is a kind of a disappointment in most cases, not always, but it disengages your viewer if you give them everything, if you show everything. That's not always true, but it's mostly true. Um, and so there's that aspect of showing only part engages the viewer to like fill in the rest in their imagination. But the second part is even more important here, and that is that um, human beings, well, if you just think about if you hold your fingers or hold your hands up to to look at, when you look at your hands, if you look at your fingernails or if you look at the palms of your hands or whatever, uh, they are about, I don't know, 18 inches away at the most. And if you have reasonably good close up eyesight, you might even have your hands closer, like 12 inches or 8 inches away, right? Depends on whether or not you have good close up vision or not. But uh, evolution has resulted in as human beings, are having incredible, right, visual acuity. We can see very sharply, and more than that, human beings have an incredible sensitivity to textures, substances, surfaces, color, light reflectivity, um, shapes, all of that kind of stuff. We have to, as it turns out, evolution sort of resulted that in us uh, for survival. It's really important to know what is when you're 100,000 million years ago. What's a ripe fruit? That is good for you as opposed to an unripe? What's a poisonous substance? What is a putrefied piece of meat as opposed to a nice fresh piece of meat? Um, what is a dangerous insect? What's a not dangerous one? What's a, the list goes on and on. What looks like clean water, as opposed to you don't want to drink it. So we have developed incredible sensitivities for this kind of almost microscopic level. Well, not quite microscopic eyes, but microscopic level, macroscopic level attention to substances, materials, details. That's really evident now when we think about modern films and modern contemporary media going forward is that viewers can't get enough of close-ups. We that it's what it is as if our eyes were very hungry, and we are hungry for the substance and physicality of the world. And we have these brilliant imaginations. We can fill in all the peripheral stuff. So you don't have to bother including everything in the shot. In fact, we crave looking at things close up. Now, the interesting thing about when you look at things close up, when you get more experience doing this with a camera and so on, is you discover the world is dirty or moist or messy or greasy or slippery or hairy or dusty, or all of the things that are not classically quote unquote beautiful and correct. All the mess of the world, all the juiciness of the world becomes apparent. This is an important lesson to understand that um, that is the very stuff of human experience and of art making and of being persuasive and telling stories is to work with the grit and grime and gloriousness of the world and all of its substance. All right. In specific, in this shot, as I got close to the electric tea kettle, and I pointed my camera there, two things attracted my eye. The first was uh, I saw the what do you call that? The condensation on the lid, and it was kind of drippy, and it was yeah, it just attracted me. And I am trained, have trained myself over the decades that to know that's important. That's really important. These things that are passing are, instead of wiping that off, so it's not a wet thing. Instead, it's like, no, that's important. Once I recognize that, then I also sort of the story party telling part of myself is like, oh yeah, so I get a twofer on this. Not only is it interesting and textural, but it someone could read into this. Oh, they're going to be making coffee or tea or something, or they have just heated up the tea, or something's going on here. That the morning dew is on the teapot. And the second thing that I got was for a moment that little annoying lens flare came in. Only this time I thought to myself, no, no, this is a welcome visitor. And so I actually angled I had to kind of play moving back and forth and twisting and turning until I got that lens flare. But while I was still super close up, and bingo, boom, took the shot. And that's what and probably the other thing I did was, I'm pretty sure I did, is again, I had to click on my iPhone screen to select specifically to expose for that dewy lid. And I think I had to close down the exposure, like I had to darken the image so that that lid wasn't overexposed. I still got my lens flare. I got my lid properly exposed. And the benefit was it took the background, which is that tile wall in the background, and it sunk it back into some shadow. And that created more drama. If I had let this auto expose according to what the camera would do, it would have overexposed the spout, and you probably might not see those little beads of water on the inside of the lid. So this is again a case where it required my intervention to choose what I wanted to have properly exposed. So just to recap, first shot, we set the morning sun coming through the window. Second shot, this pretty extreme close up of a teapot with some beads of moisture on the lid and the sun. It almost looks like the sun is beaming into the open lid of the teapot. There's some kind of relationship going on there between the teapot and the sun. Well, I didn't make that relationship so much as I just caught it. So I went on to shoot more shots of the tea kettle, but I need to backtrack for a second because after I shot the photos of the tea kettle and a couple of other things, uh, I was kind of lifted my view out of from those close-ups and um, I happened to notice something, like, in my visual field, and it was this. And as it turns out, in the final sequence, I actually put this as the second image. The first image is the shot of the light coming through the window, and this is the second image. And but I didn't shoot it in that sequence. That's how it ended up, but I didn't shoot it in that sequence. But I want to talk about it while we're still at the beginning here, and that is so. In some ways, you could say this is just a very logical cause and effect relationship. One, the first to the second image. Well, duh, it's so obvious, right? But it wasn't for me, and so there's a little mini lesson here, and that is that I was looking at the light on the floor. I was going from looking at this tea kettle and some objects, and in the process got distracted by the light on the floor. And this light was moving, by the way, because the trees were getting blown by the wind, and so it was sort of dappled and swaying and pulsing. And um, part of me just thought, oh, it was I was sort of uh, distracted, and then I thought, boy, that's a cool shot, and I actually did not think that I would take a photo of it and that it had any relationship to anything else I was shooting. Uh, but, I'm trained enough to know to say to myself, "Well, look, if you're attracted to something, take a picture of it." In fact, the fact that it was something, it wasn't an object, like this this was an illusion, it was light playing on a floor. That's one of those things. I've been doing this for, I don't know, 40, 45, 50 years, that I have to remember again and again, which is, uh, look for those things to include that are not objects, visual phenomena, shadows, reflections, flares, uh, glares, all kinds of things like that. And so this was a case where I actually had to say to myself, even though you don't necessarily, this makes sense to shoot this, you probably should shoot this because this falls into one of those categories of things that you realize later on, oh, that works perfectly. This is one of those shots. So I did. I shot it. Um, notice the way that I framed it is I don't include anything else. So this is another overarching lesson here, which is you have to have make a real effort to get rid of the clutter in most of the time when you're shooting. And the way that we get rid of the clutter is by framing tighter or, angling in a certain way so that you don't see, because you don't see, for example, there are just to the bottom right are the cat feeding bowls, but you don't see them because I didn't want to include them. If they were included there, the picture would look different. Um, Up in the upper left is right the base of the oven and the stove, but you don't see it because I didn't include it because I don't want that. All I want for you to see is this weird sort of overlay of these abstract squares and then this other kind of oblique bit of light with some mushy shapes, and the whole thing is kind of in tones of gray and mottled and speckled. And if this were a motion image, you would see also this really cool kind of heaving, dappled uh, uh, shadow. So I shot it, and then later when I was putting the sequence together, I realized it was perfect. Um, and it also makes a sort of a very prosaic logical connection. You show a window with sunlight coming in, and the next shot is you show that sunlight on the floor. There's no stretch of the imagination there. It sort of just goes one to the other. So with this next shot, I did something that I do regularly. I mean, I shoot like this regularly because every now and then it works, and I think it sort of works here. And that is, when I'm shooting with a phone, for example, is uh, I almost as a dare, I instinctively say, how can I get even closer or how can I get inside that thing? Or how can I get underneath that thing? Or how can I look at it from the bottom or from the inside out? Whatever, how can I look at this in a way that is just from an angle that no one would even normally be able to see? And I wouldn't even know, would it be worth it looking at it that closely or not? Who knows what you're going to see? And in this case, I'd never really stared down inside there. And I didn't shoot it thinking, "Oh, this will be interesting," knowing it'll be interesting. It was just a guess. Now I did actually take a shot, I think oh, I guess not. But this has got my phone right inside it. I don't do a zoom in. It's a whole different kind of shot. So, and in this case, I had to just let it auto expose, and then I kind of changed the exposure later to get this sort of darkish exposure. So I don't know how this works on you as a viewer, but my feeling was just to create this kind of wonder, this experience that is imaginative, but it's very realistic. And I'm not sure, but I think people would recognize what this is. So it's not so disorienting that they are just left with, I have no idea what that shot was. Um, I'm hoping that people will recognize it. Oh, yeah, right, right, right. That's the inside of the tea kettle. There's what attracted me and why I put it in is because, uh, on one hand, it is absolutely ordinary. It's just the inside of the tea kettle. Everybody would glance at the inside of the tea kettle maybe to see, does it need more water? Is it clean in there? Uh, that kind of thing. Um, but it's also this really powerful image to my mind. It's this water chamber with this metal vaulted bottom and this window, almost space age kind of Star Trekky window of light coming in, and it's awash in water. And oh yeah, so it's a really interesting location, kind of at the core of this quote unquote story. I took this shot. I'm pretty sure I was attracted to this because for reasons, uh, for the same reasons why probably the designer who designed this electric tea kettle designed it this way, is that there was this element of, it was kind of space age, high design, 2001 design era, a tall, slender oval in, in translucent white, uh, uh, window, and this very simple abbreviated text max. I don't know what the other one says, 1 liter maybe, and the one says 0.5 liter minimum. And it's got a very dramatic black frame or bezel around it. Um, and the light coming through it and reflecting on it is what sort of knits it to the previous stuff. And I thought it was I found it to be elegant in its ovalness and kind of grand and almost uh, uh, I don't know, totemic sort of vertical imagery. And so it was extraordinarily sort of uh, epic looking, um, uh, right, right from the most ordinary thing, the electric tea kettle. Um, I guess the word max just I don't know, Maxman. I can't explain it, but it seemed epic and visually arresting and have the elegance of the morning. And so I shot this. Again, this is an extreme close up. And again, I had to really darken down the image from what the camera would have recorded if I'd let it on automatic. So this next shot, I actually didn't shoot it next. What I shot next is what you're going to see after this shot. So I reversed the order in the final playback. But And the reason is because the next shot is what inspired me to do this shot. The next shot you're going to see is water coming out of a tap close up. So this shot I shot afterwards, um, but I put first. This is a cause and effect shot. So you're seeing a close up of my finger holding, open the tap. You get that nice lens flare too. And then the next shot you'll see is water coming out of a faucet. So that's really prosaic as opposed to poetic, right? That's really just you do this, you get that. Cause, effect. But that's not why I did this. Um, at this point, this also reflects a sort of an idea I feel, and that a lot of storytellers, people that are experienced doing storytellers do, which is at some point, maybe not at the beginning, but in the beginning third of your quote unquote sequence story or whatever, is um, the audience will potentially crave to have some connection with the subjectivity behind this, meaning the person, uh, you know, e- e- humans evolutionarily are predisposed to experience the world through other people. Yes, we experience the world directly, but especially in our media and in our stories, in our storytelling, and in our conversation, we are predisposed to hear and experience story world through a point of view, the point of view of the storyteller. Um, yes, humans are interested in humans don't uh, require there always to be somebody who's giving the point of view and that things be point of view stories. You can watch any documentary or watch the news, and in many of those cases, even though there isn't a point of view, that point of view is not foregrounded, right? Although, and same is true, and when you're reading a novel, in the novel, the author, lots of authors, lots of novelists don't get into saying, here, this is my particular experience. You just assume it, right? And in novels, in fact, some novels, we love it if we don't think about the author, but we think about the people that are in the novel. But by the way, when we're most novels, not all, but most novels involve getting inside the head of the main character, or at least empathizing with the main character. So there we are again, human beings trying to experience the world through other human beings. So I and many storytellers, digital storytellers, take that to heart. And at some point, just naturally include some of that first person experience. So that's my hand. I put my phone in my left hand because I'm a right hander, and I shot this shot, and I included just my thumb and index finger and a little finger uh, touching the tap. And so, yes, it's a cause and effect relationship. Like, oh, he turned on the tap. Oh, the water came out. But it is also um, an an a means of adding a first person, a point of view uh, into the story sequence. And the other nice thing is that if I'd got an actor to do this, I still like the image because um, the way that these big fleshy fingers relate sort of texturally and substantially with this cold, shiny chrome uh, tap handle, and how that's all united together by this slanting glare of lens flare. The ease of the fingers doing the tap and the elegance of the tap and so on, all of that seems for me to add to the humanness of this image sequence, so that this is not just like it's not like a sync ad or or a kitchen appliance ad, but that there's this warmth going on here and there's human interaction. I wonder if you can guess what really gets me juiced in this photo. Well, the reason why I included it, it isn't the reason why I shot it initially because I didn't even notice it until I looked at the image. But I did shoot it once, and then all of a sudden I could see it on the camera image. I guess I couldn't see it with my bare eye, and then I went back and reshot. Actually, I had to shoot it a couple of times to get the exposure right because this one at 2, I had to change the exposure to get it just exactly like this. It's also super close up, so it was a little difficult getting the framing. I wonder if you have guessed what it was that just thrilled me about this. Well, let me tell you. You see those speckles of spray, it's little particles of mist essentially. Um, that just did it for me. Um, you can see the theme now through all these is emerging that has to do with moisture and beads of condensation and water in the early morning light, and that those little speckles of mist rising next to the torrent downrush of water from the faucet really grabbed me and really felt like yes, this was all part of of what I was accumulating here as a feeling, as a mood, as a sense of a sequence of a setting. Um, I could never have planned this, and like I said, I didn't even see it when I shot it first, but, you will encounter so many happy accidents like this as you practice extreme close-ups. When in doubt, shoot even closer, even closer, and then scrutinize the image and see if you can discover something you didn't notice so that you could go back and get more intentionally uh, these things like this. So this was, you know, one of those great revelations for me, and it works for me. Now, do I did you guess what I said? What do you think got juiced me about this? If you didn't guess those little speckles of dew, that's okay. Um, I still think uh, there are a significant number of viewers, given 3 to 5 seconds looking at this image, um, will wind up either glancing or being as kind of entertained by the appearance of those little speckles too. Even if they couldn't articulate it and say, "Oh, yeah, that's really the subject of this photograph," right? But that is kind of the art training, right? The digital media artist training is to be able to understand there are all kinds of things. In fact, probably the more important things that affect viewers are things, as I'm saying 100 million times over, that are not what you would logically have guessed, what you logically will have deduced. But there'll be these other things that turn out to, when you unpack them, you realize, oh, there's enormous logic to that, right? At about this point in the shooting, it was very plain to me that what I was doing was the sequence was just prosaically making a morning cup of tea. And um, likewise with your assignment, I want you to don't choose something wild and crazy like a car chase or some other dramatic thing with wild twists and turns. For this assignment, it would be most useful to mind something that is perhaps ordinary. There is a power in creating something extraordinary out of the ordinary that I want to make sure is part of the experience for you here. Um, and it's sometimes just easier and face it, most of what's available to all of us is just ordinary life. None of us, very few of us, have access, immediate access to the wild and crazy. Um, so at this point, I'm thinking, oh, I'm making a cup of tea, and I thought, in this case, I'm being logical. I'm saying, oh, okay, so now it's tea time. Let me get the tea, and I have to tell you, this was not how the box was on my counter. I have to tell you, and it's a useful lesson. There was all kinds of crap on the counter. My counters are just covered with crap. Like there's a Cheez-It box. There was a red onion from last night. There was a what do you call it? A bottle of vegetable oil. There was all kinds of junk. There was even stuff on the floor. I think a cat toy was on the floor, and I think there was a towel hanging on one of those drawer knobs. And so the first thing I did is I kind of generally got my framing, and here's something that was guiding me. I knew I was going to have a box of Earl Grey. I knew I was going to shoot the box. It's so important. It's very useful to get that off center, because if you take something that has a label, meaning it has printed text on it saying what it is, and you put that in the middle of the frame, that might be logical and might seem real clear. Oh, you may even have like a sort of perverse Wes Anderson sort of sensibility of like going hyper uh, uh, symmetrical. I don't know. That's not. I think you got to be Wes Anderson to pull that off with and not be just dead boring. um, so I immediately knew I got to get this thing off center because it's so powerful. It has words and it says what it is, and it's a box and it's a label, because labels are designed to be to be arresting visually. So all of that suggested, okay, this definitely doesn't have any problem calling attention to itself. So let me move it off to one side. But um, I felt like it would be a good idea. Well, when I had the Cheez It box in the shot, it actually competed with the Cheez It box. And I didn't want people to be thinking about Cheez Its. I only wanted them to be thinking about the tea. I didn't want them to be thinking about the onion or the towel or the cat toy. So I actually doctored up, like I had to move stuff out of the way until I could get this shot, which, albeit, is shot to look really candid, really uncomposed, right? The tee box is off to one side. The shot is from an angle and it's looking down, but it's sort of askew. And the sun is coming through. In fact, the sun is a little glaringly bright on the drawer front, but that's okay. That's not supposed to be the part that matters the most. The part that matters the most is the Earl Grey tee box. There are other things that, if you were a student of photography, you'd begin to sort of learn. Let me bring up one of those right now. Um, and these are based on just observations over more than a century of photography, or more than thousands of years of visual art. Human eyes, human beings' attention, so a combination of their eyes and their brains and their attention, they tend to be attracted to, in pictures and in life, they tend to be attracted to uh, a certain set of things. For example, we are more attracted to contrast. When there's a higher contrast, all things being equal, we'll we attend we tend to be attracted to areas of contrast. We tend to be attracted to areas of bright color. We tend to be attracted to brightness with bright contrast. Um, uh, and there are other things. In terms of video, we tend to be attracted to things that are moving, or things that are in sharp focus. So of the many of the things that I mentioned there are more, but those turn out to be the very basic toolkits, uh, sort of the conceptual toolkits used by cinematographers, by directors, by visual designers of all kinds, from packaging design to you name it. And those very same things also apply in the imaginative sense. A writer in a novel does actually use those same toolkits. You might not think so, you might think, well, my novel's got no pictures in it. It's all just words. But in fact, it's full of word pictures. And if you take those apart and look at them, you'll realize that the novelist is also applying focus by what they talk about and describe and what they don't, or what they talk about generally and then what they talk about specifically. That the novelist provides contrast and rubs textures against each other or characters or moments, or that the novelist will provide motion to attract your inner imaginative eye and focus. So these things are universal rather than specific only to, say, photographers and visual language. Very powerful. So here's another good example. So I'd done that shot of the Earl Grey tea box, which was very logical. Oh, okay, we're making tea, and I guess it's just part of my natural sensibility as a storyteller is, you know, don't get, this is me talking to myself. Don't if you get logical and you get like cause effecty kind of thing, and you do something like, oh, I'm making tea, okay, quickly once you've done that, within the next slide, let's go poetic again, please, because that's the last thing you want to do. It as you learn to become more effective as a storyteller is you realize you've got to stay ahead of your viewer. You've got to keep dashing into the woods and having them chase after you. If you just stop the chase and just say, okay, now here's the tea, here's the sugar, here's the and you just kind of do lockstep like that. um, you the game is over. The viewer is kind of like knows what you're talking about, and you will lose them. Likewise, you can lose them if you all of a sudden dash in the forest and they can't follow you. So this next shot was an attempt to dash back into the forest. So, okay, I showed you Earl Grey tea. It literally is a box that says Earl Grey. Now you know what we're doing here is a sequence of making tea in the morning. And then pretty quickly, next slide, I got to get back into the woods. So like, follow me. And so this is not actually the first shot I did uh, in that effort. The shot I didn't include here is also of this spoon. It's also close up. It's also shot, but I immediately thought, oh, I know. I'll hold the spoon up against the brightly backlit window, so the spoon is kind of like an obelisk, like it's a talisman, like it's a great symbol in silhouette. um, that's my imagination being grandiose, imagining, and it's not a bad thought. It's a good uh, boy, try it out. So I did. I held it up. I shot it, and it actually didn't look. It didn't look as good as I imagined, or it looked fine, but it wasn't. It didn't. I don't know. Something about it just didn't send me. Probably because, well, I just don't know. But then I looked at it and I thought, oh, okay, well, that wasn't the greatest thing. Oh, and by the way, you might even see here is if you look at the sequence back in the beginning, if you can look at the whole page of shots, that was when I turned my gaze away from the window and I was sort of holding the spoon in my hand, and that's when I saw the shadow on the floor and shot the shadows on the floor. And then I held the spoon up in front of. That's actually just looking at the spoon, same close-upness, with the floor in the background instead of the bright backlit window. And when I did it that way, and also when I shot it like that, all of a sudden the spoon took on dimension. It wasn't a silhouette, but it was something maybe more interesting. It was this bulging round shape. And the beautiful lens, the way the lens worked is that because it was so focused on the spoon, it really blurred the background out, which was great. And it gave me you can see some of the nicks on the spoon surface. Like you could see the brushed chrome, nickel, or whatever it is, plating on the spoon. And you can sort of see the morning sunlight, or maybe that's I can't tell, but you can see a warm spot of brassy colored light, and then this cool, maybe the light coming through the window, and maybe there's a cloud, and s it's just gorgeous, and those little tiny flecks of nicks around the edges, but the whole thing, because, uh, of the framing, looks alien and sublime, uh, and really just what I wanted, right? I was making tea, but there's an overwhelming feeling I have here of the sublime nature of early morning, of this the importance and the elegance, the, almost otherworldliness of life at this fresh, raw, early time of the day. This pristine is another way of saying that, right? At this point, while I was shooting, I knew I was kinda getting to the latter part of the arc, that maybe there was only 1 or 2 more shots left. Uh, I don't have a set number or anything, it just felt like, okay, like when you're telling a story, once you kinda have told the story, or you're told much of the fullness of the story, it's time to wrap it up, kind of thing. And I kind of felt like, well, we'd shown the Earl Grey tea box, we'd shown the wild kind of alien spoon form. I think we've kind of we need to wrap this up. And I don't mean wrap it up like make sense or some kind of summary statement. It's just that there aren't many more shots left here. Um, and the other thing that happens, which is very interesting, I think creatively, is those last shots are can be some of the most intentional, as you will see here. Um, for this shot, I took 4 separate photos. Now, a lot of the other shots, I just shot 1 photo or so. This shot, I shot 4 photos, and, if you look back at the contact sheet with all the photos, the page with all the photos, you'll see they're all pretty similar. Their only difference is, close-upness and uh, the state of the tea bag kind of thing. And I ultimately picked this one, and this I believe this was somewhere in the middle or whatever. Um, and what happens creatively is that um, the it becomes clear. You essentially discover what the piece is going to be about as you're making the piece, and as you discover it, the last couple of shots then uh, you can be more intentional because you kind of are aware, "Oh, this is where we're going." So then you can think, "What more can I do?" Or "What's missing that I really ought to add?" And you don't have to add everything, but, or yeah, that kind of thing. And so at this point, I pop the tea bag into the cup, and of course, I wanted it to I didn't have an inspiration, but I relied on my own, my early training, which is when in doubt, get super close up. So I took the camera, the phone, and I poked it right into the mouth of the cup, which was steaming, which instantly fogged my lens, which instantly I for a millisecond, I was peeved like, "Oh, how am I going to get a picture of this hot, steaming liquid if it's steaming my lens?" But that was only a millisecond when another part of me, a better part of me said, "It's perfect. That's great. Let it steam the lens, right? Let the lens get all steamy. That's great. That's no problem at all. Yeah, go with it." And so and then, of course, another part of my brain is like, "But I can't see anything. The viewer won't be able to see anything." And I thought, "Maybe they will. Get close and so what I did was I tried a couple of like, I'd let it get steamy and then take a shot, and then I'd wipe the lens to see if it looked better unsteamy, and then I'd take another shot just as it was beginning to get steamy. I shot wider, But what I discovered was I had an instinct that we don't want to see the ordinary. I mean, it is an ordinary thing. It's a tea bag and some water in a cup, but we want to see it made extraordinary. And one of the simplest and most powerful things we have to make it something extraordinary, which I've used in the previous photos here, is the power of framing. So if you can exclude stuff from the shot, you can disorient people, and it becomes, what is this space? It's this white, gauzy, um, weird fog, and this strange diamond shaped thing that has some texture, and but within a half a second, any person looking at it, oh, I know what it is. It's a tea bag. Oh yeah, there's an air bubble. Those are tea leaves. It must be in, oh, I guess it's in water, tea in water. And that is so important to make it possible for people to do that, to become disoriented for a moment, but not so long that they check out, but enough so that they can then kind of connect the dots. And they're not doing this logically or intentionally. It's all automatic on the part of the viewer, and it happens very quickly. But it is such a meaningful thing that people are able to assemble this in their mind. Now, this is not something that you can sort of strategize outright. Like, I don't think when I'm going to take a shot or something, how can I obscure this so that people will have to figure this out? That's not exactly the recipe for me. Instead, the recipe more is, how can I um, really immerse myself. And then when I start to immerse myself by going hyper close up, by eliminating points of reference, not flipping out and saying, oh, wait, nobody's going to recognize that. Instead, having a little bit more faith and realizing, no, in fact, viewers are pretty clever. It is possible for me to take a shot where you wouldn't recognize what it is. Um, but there is this territory in between where people would recognize it, and yet you've sort of decontextualized a little bit in this case, uh, and then you find out as a result that's actually better storytelling, because you're pulling people into the immersive experience, and they're assembling the meaning to catch up with you, and so on. So that's the shot. I almost didn't include it in the final uh, slideshow, but now I'm really glad that I did. So with the next 15 or so shots that I took, which is like half of the total number of shots, I'm shooting the last shot. I don't know that it's going to be for sure the last shot, but I have a sense that I don't have that many shots left. Um, so I'm not thinking that this is the end or anything. I'm all I'm thinking is, what more, what else, how can I scratch this itch? And if you look on this page, you can kind of see the first four shots, or the first three shots, uh, of which I took the first shot, which is the tea bag. And then I kind of zoom out a little bit, or I pulled the phone away, and you can see the lens clears up, the fog dries off of it, and the tea is making itself. It's steeping, and it's beginning to seep into the water and tint the watercolor. And then I thought, well, go back in, go hyper close up, because I didn't know that those other. In fact, I didn't think that those other blurry white ones were going to be usable anyways. I thought, okay, now let's get some super close-ups of the tea. I can maybe get the tea leaves and the water or something. I don't know. So you can see a bunch of shots. Here's one here, and then here, and then here, and here. And, after doing those four, I didn't feel like wasn't really doing it for me. Then I thought, well, let's try something else. Let's shoot the glass. Let's focus, instead of on the tea bag, focus on the color of the water, the tea color. And so I held the glass up to the light, and I did a sequence of shots first. This one, this one. It was kind of hard to get it to be, sort of in focus. And I thought, well, maybe they'll be okay. It won't be in focus. Uh, I got better, switched hands and so on until I got something like this. Um, and then I want to just jump ahead here. Then I had this idea, well, okay, I'm not going to have a lot of control by holding a glass up over my head up to the light and my phone and trying, and the phone is auto focusing and blah blah blah. So instead what I did was, if you go over to this frame, you can see I just, this is not, I knew this wasn't going to be in the shot, but I wanted to take a shot of this so that you could see what I wound up doing. What I did was I just put the glass of tea, up here on the window ledge, the top edge of the window frame. So at least it's against the window, and now I can, focus on close-ups, right? So I get this shot, and I really liked this one, because it was framed tightly, and I thought, oh, I don't know, when I get a good shot, I am having so much fun sometime, and I know that I don't have many shots probably I'm gonna do anymore. I'll just, oh, let me shoot a bunch of extra ones, because it'll, try and adjust things. Let's see what else I can mess with. So I shot that one, and then I shot this one. By the way, with the close up, I can actually see there's cat hair on the glass. That's interesting. Anyways, I really love this, uh, dew or speckle or whatever, combined with this, which I believe is the glass of the window, where this is fogging the window in the background. And then then I thought, oh, because I had taken the tea bag out to shoot those other ones. So I put the tea bag in and I shot this one. By the way, you should know that I messed with the exposure on this. I thought, yeah, that's interesting. Actually, the tea bag is kind of interesting there, but I thought, I don't like this wide framing. I don't want to, know that it's the glass. And then I got this one. I thought, oh, that's closer to the framing that I want. And that's when I noticed, after I shot at these three bubbles and these bits and pieces, and I thought, oh yeah, I can recognize that this is a tea bag, and I'm getting this kind of underwater tea color here, but this fresh window stuff, and I'm shooting. And then I think this was the last shot, and I thought, I don't know why, but I guess because it's a higher contrast or something, I like this one the best. Lots of deep amber tea color here, like underwater, this darkness here, but then up here, almost um, like hammered silver or hammered lead or something, this incredible deckled texture, and then this little bit of fuzziness here. And of course, this big gigantic tea bag with its huge rope, which is really just a little, string on the tea bag. And it's framed in such a way that this is almost like a horizon line, this arcing thing. And that really was the topper for me. It really worked. And I kept that one. Um, uh, Anyways, it was this one. This is the last shot, best I can remember now, in the sequence. And um, I couldn't tell you how, does this logically sum things up? Well, cause and effect. It's like, well, I made a cup of tea. There you go. It's a cup of tea. It's ready to drink. Um, but uh, you know, I could think formalistically. Another thing that probably why it works for me, is everything. Much of this is left to right. The light coming in from the window is established, coming from the upper right, upper left down to the lower right. That's the way the sun was coming in through my kitchen window, and that's the way the sun was hitting most of what I was shooting. Now, I guess I have an instinct for that formal sun relationship. I might have violated that, but I think I kept that throughout most of it. That is one of those kind of advanced techniques that you learn in cinematography. it roughly falls under the category of continuity. In this case, it's lighting continuity, but it's also part of the formal continuity, visual continuity of a piece. So, it maintains that continuity. This tea bag is sort of leaning and less resting to the right, to allow and suggest the light coming in from the upper left. So it maintains that diagonal continuity oriented towards the upper left. Maybe that's why this feels right and works for me, is that it sort of sums up that sort of directionality, continuity to it. Yeah. Now it's your turn. What I'd like you to do is to make your own sequence of images that create a moment, that sort of tell a story in the manner that I have explained in this previous voice thread. So, what you're going to need to do first is shoot your images. You can shoot them on a phone, you can shoot them on a DSLR, whatever you're most comfortable with. You have to be able to take those images and select them, and being able to put them on a computer in a computer file, basically a folder, so that when you go into VoiceThread, you're going to actually create your own VoiceThread. That's how you're going to create your image sequence. And the way that you use VoiceThread, I'm assuming, is through your computer. So I'm going to just show you now how it looks on my computer, how you would do it. So once you got to this point in this voice thread, the next thing you're going to do is you'll quit out of this voice thread. So in my case, I hit this X, and it brings me to this page. Now I'm assuming it'll bring you to a similar page. The most important thing is if you have this button here called create. That's what you need to have, is the create button. You need to create a new voice thread, your own voice thread. You're not adding on to this voice thread of mine, which we've done in the past. Instead, you're creating your own voice thread. So you're not going to be adding commentary. You're going to be creating your own voice thread. When you're ready, then you will click create and you'll create your own voice thread. To be ready, you have to go out and shoot some images. So you'll have to revisit this voice thread to get back to this page, if that's how you get into voice thread. So go out and shoot 7 to 11. I wouldn't go too much past 11 images. I wouldn't go anything under 7 images. And apply the same kind of creative process and the same level of scrutiny and care and concern that I explained throughout my process. The emphasis is pick a sequence of something ordinary. You're going to make it extraordinary as you explore that process. And then you're going to, in this case, you'll have your images. You'll know what the order of them is. You've selected your 7 to 11 images. You know what's first, second, and third, and so on. You'll go into create here. And here it is. This allows me to create a new voice thread, as it will you. You are going to click on add media. You'll pick my computer, and then you'll, navigate your way through your file structure to find your images. And once you pick an image and you hit open, the first time you do it, it'll ask you for a title for the whole piece. So you can title your piece whatever you want. I'm going to title this XYZ just because it's a sample, and hit save. And now you'll see your image is here, your first image, and now you can add media. So that's where you put your second image. Again, from my computer, I'm just basically recreating now my 11 image sequence. It's not going to ask me to write the name because it has the title now for the piece here. It's going to process, and there's image number 2. And then you put all the rest till you get to your 7 to 11, or a little bit more, whatever, images on there. and that'll do it. So the next step is it auto saves. So then you've got to share that with me. And this is very important. I need you to paste a link, get a link to this voice thread and paste it in a particular Google form that I've set up for you. Let me show you how that's done. So you go into share and return to course. So I'll click on this and here it is, submit share. And now here it is. It's been included in all of this. This is your new voice thread. Right here is a share button. You're going to click on that. And here you're going to click on the basic tab. And here it is, copy link. This is very important. You're going to copy this link. So now I've copied it to my clipboard. And now you go back to our class Blackboard. Here's our Blackboard. This is what your Blackboard looks like. Scroll on down. Here's assignment number 3 right here, creating a moment. That's the voice thread you're watching now. Here is where I want you to submit your link. So you'll click on this and it'll say assignment number 3, upload the link to your sequence. So here it's asking for your name. And then this is where you paste that link. So I've pasted it here. It'll give you a link that looks like voicethread.com, blah, blah, blah. And that's it. You'll hit submit. You're done. Your assignment is now submitted and you've done it. And I'll be able to find it and I'll be able to look at it and comment on it and grade it. All righty. Good luck.